Mr. Tereš, sorry.
Thank you so much. The first set of questions is for both AstraZeneca and Moderna. So the first question is, I would like to know the date, if it's possible, when you decoded the full DNA sequence of this virus, or you solely relied on the sequence provided to you by the Chinese government. Second question, have you tested if the vaccines are stopping the spread of the virus or not? Because the data clearly shows that your products are not stopping the spread of this virus. Third question, have you had people who died during human trials? And if so, what were the illnesses that they died from? Now, I have certain questions for Moderna, for Mr. Bouncel. You stated here that you relied on the sequence provided to you by the Chinese government when you developed your vaccine. I have here an answer from EMA, which is showing for every vaccine the kind of tests that were done. So in the case of Moderna, for example, you provided data showing that you tested these vaccines since 2017, 2018, 2019. So how were you able to test these vaccines back then when we found out about this virus in December of 2019? Second question, the contracts. You mentioned here that there are some secrets or some confidential information in these contracts that should protect your interests. Now the question that I address to you, what about the interests of us and the interests of the European citizens? Because this is how some of the pages from the contract between Moderna and the European Commission is showing. So I'm asking you, do you think this is fair to all of us? To talk about these vaccines, to talk about boosters, to talk about medical products, when we don't know the clauses of these contracts. So the direct question to you, Mr. Bouncel, is when are you going to fully publish the contracts that you had both with the European Commission and with the member states of the European Union? Another question, the issue of liabilities. You were asked by our colleague here about the liabilities and you avoided to answer this question. So my question to you is, why are you pushing the liabilities on the states and on the people who receive these vaccines and might have, and I say might have, adverse effects, while you get all the profits? Nevertheless, the bivalent boosters, this is the last question.
Yeah, but
you just stated here that these boosters were requested by the US government, who also approved the boosters without trials on humans. So I'm asking you, do you think this is fair? Do you think we can go and ask the European citizens to be vaccinated with some medical products that were not properly tested or not at all tested in humans? Thank you.
Mr. Tereš, next time I'll deduct 40 seconds from your speaking time.
This is an important issue. With all due respect, it's an important issue, and the reason why they are here is to answer questions. Yes. And I see that they are all avoiding answering concrete questions from my colleagues.
Yeah, but it's also respectful for your colleagues.
They have to be transparent here, and so far they haven't been transparent. Thank you.
I start with Mr. Bouncel, and then I come to Mrs. Reich.
Chairman.
And please, very specific answer to the specific questions, please. Thank you very much.
So, on the first question, as I said before, yes, we use the sequence of a virus published by the Chinese government that was online and tested by many scientists in academic labs and government labs that we use for the design of a vaccine. You make a statement on the poor efficacy of a vaccine against preventing infection. That actually was not correct in the 2021 timeframe, where it was mostly alpha and delta. As you recall, the vaccines were holding very well to infection and, of course, hospitalization and death, which was really important. What happened was a change with Omicron. As you know, the Omicron virus was a big genetic drift from the original sequence coming out of China, which is why the vaccine needed to be retooled. The good news for public health is the vaccine held very well against hospitalization and death, which, as we all know, is the #1 priority of those vaccines. On the phase 3 clinical trial, I'm not aware of any death that happened during the phase 3 of a clinical trial. You mentioned the document from EMA, which I'm not aware of, but the vaccine that we tested before is what I mentioned to one of your colleagues in my previous set of answers, which is since 2015, we have been doing clinical trial with our vaccines. This is not, of course, against SARS-CoV-2 because the virus did not exist. It was against flu, RSV, and also a pandemic flu strain. So that is why we were able to get validation of a platform in a clinic. On the liabilities, as has been done by all the manufacturers, governments wanted a quick approval of a vaccine. And so for the conditional approval, it was important to give us some guarantees in terms of indemnification, because we cannot have our cake and eat it too. We wanted the vaccine quick without giving time to manufacturers to have long-term studies because of the nature of the pandemic. And then the last question around testing in human, as I answered in the previous set of questions, the vaccine that is as a conditional approval for booster bivalent against Omicron that has been approved in Europe last week did have clinical study happening for this vaccine. It's the one in the US that did not, but the one in Europe, there was human testing.
Mrs. Reich.
Thank you. So first, to try to add on the Mr. Bansal reply to your question, Mr. Tereš, I can say that as you probably know, our vaccine was developed from the ChAdOx platform, the adenoviral vaccine that already existed as a platform before COVID-19, and the preliminary preclinical work was done in the University of Oxford. When it comes to liability, I do believe that I'm sorry to hear that you are not satisfied with the responses, but I think we are trying here to be as transparent as possible. Liability and indemnity clause was discussed and agreed with many governments around the world, because everybody wanted to try to see how we can accelerate the development and the delivery on the vaccine. And again, as I mentioned, that is something that is considered to be a standard practice in the emergencies, and equally that protects and support everybody to move at utmost speed and do their utmost best for on developing or manufacturing side. Also, the liability or indemnity clause is valid only for the certain those that are contracting, so only for the pandemic phase.